Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makpool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to the, of course, renewed wave of terrorism that we've seen hitting the country, unfortunately, and for which, of course, there is a renewed resolve to fight this menace. And we have seen previously also that the Prime Minister had announced Azm-e Istikam, which later he has now clarified is not a military operation or a large-scale operation to be carried out as a military offensive. Rather, it is Vision Azm-e Istikam, which is important to understand because the resolve on the matter is the important aspect or the essence of this entire purpose. And so this is something, again, that the Prime Minister had to clarify amid the kind of criticism and opposition that has come from many political parties in the opposition, accounting that they had not been taken into confidence while this was being announced, which is, again, something that the Prime Minister has denied, saying that there will be, of course, consensus on the matter or decisions that are going to be taken from different political parties and their opinions with regards to this resolve under which the intelligence-based operations are going to be intensified and no large-scale military offensive is going to take place, something that was echoed again by the Defense Minister as well, saying that there will be proper time given for debate to the political parties before this is actually put into action. And so he also talked about and urged the different political parties to be cognizant of the situation and national security of the country and, of course, what is there that hangs in the balance, particularly in terms of economic prosperity and development, and of course the CPEC project, for which of course utmost care needs to be taken. And so he urged the political parties to only consider national interests and not their own political gains when it comes to this particular action. So we're going to be taking a look at this, what this means, especially with regards to what sort of aspects are going to be taken into account when this vision is launched and how exactly will the national action plan be enforced, and then of course consensus with different political parties taken on the matter. Our next issue is also going to be taking a look at the world around us and of course what has been going on in Gaza. Unfortunately, the genocide by Israel continues, and many months later we have seen thousands of Palestinians have already lost their lives, including women and children and the elderly, and we have seen that their places of refuge have also been targeted, particularly by the Israeli forces. What is important also to know that the only way that this information is actually coming out from Gaza is because of the heroic acts of the journalists and media workers on ground who are bringing forth the news as to what is happening and what is the ground reality for the people of Palestine. And they too have been targeted by the Israeli forces, and many of them have lost their lives in these acts of bravery. However, we've also seen now that in a recent report, an investigation by The Guardian, there is also evidence that perhaps the understanding of the IDF also does not exist in terms of protecting media workers. In fact, they have been actively targeting the media workers and journalists, claiming that they're associated with Hamas or they are an armed wing of Hamas, and so they have blurred the lines between reporting and being affiliating with an armed organization. And so we're going to be taking a look at what this means, especially in terms of course, the kind of denials or statements and rhetoric that we have previously already seen by Israel, which basically amount to nothing when it comes to the lives of the Palestinians that have already been lost and continue to be lost. That is going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Patafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment with regards to the issue of counterterrorism, and of course, Azm-e Istikam, we've been joined online by Brigadier Rashid Wali Junjua, who's Director Research, IPRI. Thank you very much, Brigadier Saab, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And I'll start with you, given, of course, how this particular initiative and measure is extremely important, given the wave of terrorism that we've seen recently, and of course, the need to be able to protect our security personnel and the economic prosperity of Pakistan as well, in light of CPEC in particular. And so I want your take, particularly in terms of the kind of political ruckus that unfortunately this has created, and of course the way that this is going to be carried out. The Prime Minister has clarified that this is a vision under which of course increased intelligence-based operations are going to be taking place, and essentially that is what matters as part of this new initiative. But I want your perspective in terms of your understanding of Azm-e Istikam and what you think it will mean in terms of ground realities and measures taken by the government against terrorism.
Thank you very much, Sana. As a nation, I believe we need to be very serious, and we should wake up from this slumber. There's a clear and present danger to our national security in the shape of TTP menace and counter-terrorism campaign that has been foisted upon us. No mawkish or timorous response would do. Pusillanimity needs to give way to a sustained, courageous, and very concerted whole of the nation approach. And I think there was somewhere in the cacophony of this conflict and polarized environment, the message was lost about this Azm-e-Istehkam. Azm-e-Istehkam does not mean a military operation, and I was frankly myself quite taken aback once the whole discourse shifted on to the military and kinetic dimension and people started opposing tooth and nail. No, the military operations are already underway. What permission and what further debate is required on that? The danger is already upon us. The floodgates have opened. Now we should have no, pretense of hiding behind any diplomatic niceties and call a spade a spade. It is a full-blown insurgency supported from Afghanistan. TTP has bases in Kunard, Nangarhar, Khost, Paktia, Paktita, from where they are getting the proper support, training, indoctrination, and then they are launched. It's no longer just a small proxy warfare going on. Of course, it is being actively supported by RAW, but the whole planning is being done inside Afghanistan. Despite our positive engagement, Afghanistan interim government has not been able to rein in the TTP depredations. That is very unfortunate indeed. And the result is a regular, series of attacks. The armed forces, especially army, is in front and center. And the casualties are in front of us. As you and me sit and discuss at this very moment, there's an ingress being foiled on Pak-Afghan frontier. So we need to refocus the whole nation's effort on concentrating towards this menace and to present a united front. The very first, I think the objective of this Azm-e-Istehkam was during that Apex committee meeting to refocus the nation's energies and approach towards this counter-terrorism operation, because army is already doing IBOs and IBOs will continue. There's no large-scale operation, because large-scale operation, any military strategist would tell you, is against a concrete target. There's no ungoverned space. There's no area which is held by insurgents as such.
Right.
They just come off the border, operate through their cellular structure, merge in the population, and they use those tactics of hit and run. And we know that against such a nebulous and amorphous threat, it's very difficult unless you have the public support. The insurgents, they have to be drained. The public sympathy is the water, and the insurgents are the fish. The whole swamp has to be drained of that public sympathy. And without public support, no counter-insurgency or counter-terrorism operation succeeds. This nation has to decide now, is it our war or we just outsource it to the army? So as far as army is concerned, it is already there. And with all the disadvantages of lack of help from judiciary, lack of help from other law enforcement agencies because of the capacity deficit, not the will.
Right, absolutely, and I'll speak more about that in further detail also, but I also want to understand then while you talk about how this is important, especially in terms of intensifying perhaps the existing structures and the intelligence-based operations, and of course in terms of your understanding, this was in no way a large-scale military offensive. But I want your perspective also on what will make it different from what we have already been doing against terrorism. When we talk about launching Vision Azm-e-Istikam and the fact that we still don't have the kind of national resolve or consensus from other political parties as perhaps was needed, and as part of the resolve in itself, or the Azm that we're talking about in itself, what exactly will then be the difference as to what is already happening on the ground, the efforts already made by the military, what has already been conducted against terrorism, the National Action Plan, for example, and what will exist after Azm-e-Istikam is launched?
You see, we need to understand that the environment has changed. The law enforcement agencies, the army, and those who are in the thick of this counter-terrorism campaign, they know it. But the settled districts, the rest of the nation, they need to be fully apprised of what is happening and how environment has changed. I was frankly amazed seeing the quality of debate on all these channels where analysts were speaking of 2 decades of mistakes and the old baggage and all. Well, that is all, a tale of the past. The events have overtaken all these developments, and post 2021, there is a new reality. And this is a new reality which presents new challenges. You see, in 2023, there were 15 terrorist incidents in KP, merged districts. And it was a steady rise from 2019 and 20 onwards. From 21, it was a sudden spike. The data supports this fact that it was the return of Taliban, that is the Afghan interim government, that gave a fillip to this insurgency. And the TTP was properly organized, its splinters were brought together, and it was as if somebody is orchestrating their unity. Now, this environment needs to be understood by our political forces, and the first requirement is that we need political ownership, both at federal level and provincial government level. It's amazing that the most disturbed region, frontier region, Tanak and Diyai Khan, and the undeveloped areas that abut the borders like Daraban, Daragai, where there is a fertile recruitment ground for terrorists because of the underdevelopment, because of deprivation, because of lack of livelihood and other issues. The chief minister of KP and the governor both belong to those areas. So instead of mutual acrimony, I believe they should sit down together, and each and every ounce of their energy should be consumed in trying to find solutions to this menace that is staring us in the face. Army needs full support of the political government. Unless there is political ownership, there will be no public support. And sans public support, no insurgency, counter-insurgency operation succeeds. Then we need judiciary support. Unless judiciary comes up with a system where the terrorists are convicted, the criminal, whether they modify the criminal justice system or they develop some kind of special courts, some special arrangements have to be created. Otherwise, you cannot ask army to go into the ring with hands like a boxer whose hands are tied behind his back. Full support from judiciary, from law enforcement agencies, from political leadership and public is required if we are serious in winning this existential conflict, which I term as an existential conflict because it is quite serious. And unless we stop it here, the heat would be felt in the settled areas very soon.
Absolutely. Faisal, I want your perspective also in terms of what we consider obvious in terms of dealing with the issue of terrorism. And we've, of course, clarified as a nation as well that there is zero tolerance against terrorists. And while there was consensus in the past, and there was, of course, the National Action Plan that, however, may have been put in place with different political parties and their viewpoints, now, of course, there is a need to renew that and to take that forward in the new spirit. And so I want your understanding then on the stances of the different political parties. What do you think really is the basis of this opposition or criticism? Is it just some sort of a political rivalry or ego that is being hurt at the moment, or their own political gains that are being given more preference over national interests? Or is it just that the different political parties cannot understand or comprehend the gravity of the situation as to what is going on? And then what exactly will be the way forward? The Prime Minister, of course, has assured and clarified what this vision would mean, but of course it needs the support of all the political parties and for them to be on the same page. Why is that so difficult?
Yes, Anna, it's a very good question, and to me, I think when it comes to political parties that are having sort of reservations on Azm-e-Istehkam, to me, I think it's based on the misunderstanding. They completely misunderstood it, and on the basis that they have been presuming that if in this, of course, fresh encounter against the terrorism, it might include lots of IDPs, and it might include certain areas to be constantly under the bombing. This is not going to take place like we saw in previously. I mean, we know that Zarb-e-Azb and all of these actions which were taken. In that, of course, the areas were marked, and in them area markings, the combing operations were done, and that's how we actually succeeded against the menace of terrorism. We know that there was a time when in Sawat, TTP people, they were raising their heads, and it was obviously very important at that time to calm them areas, to deter them and to eliminate them completely. And to certain extent, yes, we had success, but the ones who ran away from there, suddenly they started popping up again. And now I would agree with Brigadier Janjua when he says that IBOs are taking place. I mean, he highlighted last year's number of attacks which took place in last month. Only in a month we saw that there were 98 incidents of terrorism that took place obviously in KPK and Balochistan province. So in this matter, of course, IBOs are being conducted already, but to further enhance them, and the further improvement was of course required. As always, improvement is always there is a room of improvement, and owing to the fact that there were attacks which were being intensified against CPAC and against especially Chinese, and as we mentioned yesterday that of course terrorism is actually focusing on Pakistan's not only internal matters but of course Pakistan's foreign policy as well. How? Because somebody sitting behind the curtains is making sure that Pakistan's relationship with its brotherly friendly countries like China and other countries, they are of course jittery. And that is what they have been doing since a long time. And CPAC is a sort of a project that if hit by terrorism, then of course there is a problem, and we have seen that problems were there. These problems need to be fixed, and of course we know that our Chief of Army Staff, he has keen interest in stabilizing Pakistan, not only in economic sector, but of course Pakistan's security sector as well, because security and economy, they go hand to glove. And I think that is how the countries move on. When we talk about Azm-e-Istehkam, it's a pledge to stabilize country further. And to me, I think the political parties, especially PTI, they misunderstood it, and they thought that it is sort of an operation which is going to be targeting the political factions or political sections of Pakistan's political bonanza. And when we of course talk about them political parties, I think for them today's speech by Prime Minister, it was heartening for me to listen to it as well, because Prime Minister of Pakistan, he of course said that there is a misunderstanding and there is a misconception about it, and he tried to of course erase that the misunderstanding. And I think it was good enough for them political parties. And to Sana, if you personally ask me, I'm someone who's always concerned about Pakistan's stability.
Sure.
Right now, where we are standing, we need stabilized Pakistan, and in that context, of course, we want political stability as well, and of course security, it needs to be stabilized as well in Pakistan. So I would personally if somebody asked me, I would personally talk to all of them political parties who are going against Azm-e-Istehkam, that they need to consider it with the point that it is for whole Pakistan. It is not for a political party to score the political mileage. It is for Pakistan at large.
Right.
So if this is backed by all of the political stakeholders, then it would be more successful, and I think that's how a country should move on. To me, I think that political party and KPK CM, he needs to sit again with the Prime Minister of Pakistan and clarify all of these problems which they believe that they have with this Azm-e-Istehkam.
Absolutely.
And move on.
Right, and we'll talk, we can talk about, of course, all more things as well that should be done, but I want to also understand what possibly will be happening given what has happened previously as well and what needs to be done. And Farokh, I want your perspective also then in terms of whether or not this issue is simple in terms of just the understanding of what the operation or the vision is and what exactly will it entail, or is it larger or deeper than that? And given, of course, that the Prime Minister has already spoken and clarified the matter, will there be any change in terms of the kind of consensus or cooperation that we need to see and that needs to exist for this to be more successful? And then building on the larger vision of Azm-e-Istehkam, I also want your take in terms of what exactly will then be the way forward in terms of the threat emanating from Afghanistan. We keep talking about how that is when things increased in terms of terror activities, as Brigadier Sahab also pointed out, and of course there were other reasons within the country as well that the attacks intensified. I want the perspective in terms of when we talk about increasing intelligence-based operations, will that in a larger sense also be covering essentially what needs to be done to deal with this threat that is emanating from outside of the country too?
Right, Sana, thank you very much. First of all, regarding the name, whether you call it operation or vision or whatever you may call it, the epistemology of nomenclature does not actually worry me, because in the end, whatever it is, if it is a rose, it is a rose. What we are looking at, and this is your repeated question, right, that what has changed? Because IBOs have been going on for quite some time. The fencing of the border has continued for quite some time as well. So what has changed? As I pointed out, and it was then confirmed by the PMO last night as well, that currently there are no-go areas in Pakistan. There are no terrorist sanctuaries anywhere in the country. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a critical mass that might actually threaten that such a eventuality may arise in coming days because of whatever has been happening. So, Faisal was saying that all the terrorists that were on the run suddenly they have started popping up from here and there, right? Let me remind you why that happened. It was because Zarb-e-Azab had taken care of sanctuaries. Raddul Fasad was through IBOs taking care of most of the people who were hiding in population centers or perhaps in mountains. And then some genius went and signed an agreement of resettling TTP insurgents in Pakistan. Yeah. And after that, what we did was amazing. We immediately decided that all the pickets that were there are wound up, and these people are allowed to actually walk free. So there has to be some accountability as well. Nobody talks about that. I don't care. I just wanted to point out that it is a reality. After that, all of a sudden, we started seeing policemen being targeted in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and my God, the horrible stories that we keep on hearing, the number of beheadings that have taken place, the number of people being killed, targeted killing, that continue is staggering, right? After all those episodes, the nation has to act finally. And there is one more update. In 2014, there was a national action plan. In 2021, there was a revised national action plan because there were components which were removed from that, right? If you look at the list that is available on the NACTA's website of that, the things in the kinetic domain, for example, intolerance for militancy, action against terrorism through media, taking effective measures against religious and sectarian persecution and terrorism, choking of terror finances, and curbing increasing trends of illegal spectrum like narco trade and all. These have mostly been addressed because army was involved there. But when you look at non-kinetic domain, you are astounded that follow-up of counter-terrorism CT cases in courts. Where are those cases? Have you heard of any case being actually filed in the Supreme Court or High Court? Similarly, capacity building strengthening of CTDs, counter-terrorism departments, hardly any focus on that. Formulation of counter-violent and implementation of counter-violent extremism policy, which is very important but hasn't happened. Regulation and registration of madaris, Balochistan reconciliation process, then merged areas of KP, NFC, capacity building of LEAs hasn't happened. Reforms in criminal justice system, legislative legal oversight of espionage, supervision and repatriation of Afghan Muhajirin. Look at the non-kinetic side. What have we done? So are we going to do something about it or not? Someday we will have to, right? So this is the time when the country's economy is being once again impacted. When investors come, when businesses come, they are attacked also. So the country had to move, and finally we are doing exactly that. IBOs will be there, but they are going to be intensified. And then there is going to be a holistic manner of approach where all these things have to be actually brought together. Now, consensus. Do you honestly think that political parties that are notorious for pandering to terrorists to the extent that they brought back terrorists on the run to the country, they are going to be very easily persuaded? They are not. PTI is one example. And repeatedly I have been urging PTI leaders to listen to their own voter base, because in the past when I used to say don't do this, don't do that, they would be offended. But now what happens? Those anchors who were actually pandering to them are being harassed by these people that you were egging on our leader, and that's where we ended up here. Those people actually meet me, hug me, cry and tell me you were right and we were wrong. So the whole point is, at this moment, if you want to really take care of these matters, and by the way, Maulana Fazlur Rahman, amazing story. The guy actually comes under attack by the TTP. All of a sudden, because he can't find any solution, he goes to Afghanistan, kind of sort of surrenders there. And after that, he returns to the country and he's speaking their bhasha. When you have this kind of political acumen, I mean, we are toast if we are not going to confront this kind of pandering or opportunism. Remember, this country was not built by one person. This country has been sacrificing a lot. There are soldiers who are dying as we speak to ensure that our freedoms stay intact. So all those people who are actually undermining their sacrifices have to ask themselves, who are they actually helping? This country or the people who actually want to kill them?
Absolutely.
Sana, one liner earlier, Brigadier Janjua, he rightly pointed out that Governor and CM both are from Tank and of course Dera Ismail Khan. Farooq mentioned of course Maulana Fazlur Rahman, he is the opposition sort of leader from KPK, and he
Sort of
belongs.
leader, not sort of leader, actually
Yeah,
leader.
yeah, he belongs to the same area as well. So to me, I think Dera Ismail Khan is playing the pivotal role when it comes to KPK.
Sure. Brigadier Saab,
He realizes that.
I want your perspective also on the non-kinetic aspects that Farooq has highlighted, because this is extremely important given when we talk about our previous engagement with the National Action Plan as well, and our previous encounter with terrorism as well, and then of course what we are facing now. While we perhaps are successful and prepared completely to deal with the kinetic aspects, perhaps there are ways in which we can look at and reevaluate how to improve the non-kinetic aspects as well, particularly in terms of prevention of terrorism or building reforms or making sure that there is the kind of recovery that is needed. And so in terms of what needs to be done to ensure that there is no resurgence of terrorism again whenever we talk about any activities against it, what do you think will then be required as part of this resolve against terrorism to put our efforts in that direction far more than any others?
You see, if we go into the semantics, Azme-Istehkam means literally in English, pledge for stability. I don't know from where we got cottoned on to this kinetic element. I'm glad you asked me for this non-kinetic part. Yes, non-kinetic part has been lagging far behind, and this is a clarion call, in fact, that look, here's a threat, get serious and give whole of the nation support, mostly in non-kinetic domain, because kinetic domain is being looked after very well by army. It is giving all the necessary sacrifices equal to the task. It has squeezed spaces for the insurgents. They are on the run and resorting to hit and run, IED attacks and furtive operations. But where we lack badly is the sustainability of this whole counter-insurgency effort. There is first in the non-kinetic domain is you need to identify the development prong, that the funds that were promised for the merged districts should be provided at priority out of the NFC and even out of the NFC envelope. Then the components that need to establish the administrative writ of the state, like civil administration, police, frontier constabulary, and the judiciary, they should, establish their writ forthwith into these restive areas. Then most important is the political ownership of this venture. They must own and sit with the military component of the state to frame a strategy and and to provide resources as well. We know there is the most disturbing element is this lack of development, due to which people are getting frustrated. The case in point, I just pointed out to you, the area which is in FR Tank and near DI Khan. Unfortunately, these used to be settled districts, but these are the most restive areas now compared to Khyber Agency, Kurram, and other areas which have their problems, but they are relatively stable. And here it is a festering source of instability with maximum attacks and ingress from these directions. Why? Because there is a complete neglect to human security and development. People have no livelihood. There is no, logistic sustenance for the people. And as a result, there is ingress of terrorists and extremists who find these people very easy target to be recruited to their cause. And so if we want to win these people away, we need to provide them the livelihood, development, ensure the writ of the state. And for that, the political leadership of the province has to take the lead. Of course, the federal government will support the whole hog, but unless they are on one grid and they are playing their own political game on because of the short-term expedient gains, I think the battle would be lost before it is begun. So this is, I believe, the whole warp and woof of Operation Azme Istehkam, that the non-kinetic component, that is the criminal justice system, police, counterterrorism department, the development component, the administration, the civil administration, and the right resources for a sustainable development to make those facilities which are standing like a shell but sans the soul, and they are not functional. Like, what is the use of a school on which you have spent billions? What is the advantage of a hospital which has been created with such vast resources, which is not functional? It is of no use to the people. We say that over 80% IDPs have been settled in these areas, but those 20% which have yet to be settled also need our attention. And for that to happen, the right resources and the right focus on the civil administration, policing, development all these components have to go hand in hand. And lastly, the foreign linkage, that is across the border sustenance. We need to take care of that, and we know that most of the leadership of TTP, Hakimullah Masood, Baitullah Masood, Mullah Fazlullah, they were all taken care of through drone warfare. So if we have to resort to those things, we need to do it. And even if we have to go across, we should.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us, Brigadier Rashid Saab, for joining us and being part of this discussion, and of course talking to us at length about this very important issue regarding terrorism and of course Azme Istehkam. Farooq, you want to add something?
Right. Very quickly, I just wanted to point out this bit about consensus building, right? If you really want to do it, I tell you, you can't rely on politicians. What you need to do is use media and go to, bring all the best minds together, ask them to come up with the best FAQs possible, right? Which are needed to build consensus or the narrative. Then bring all the media and influencers together, brief them, indoctrinate them, and through them change the public opinion. That is how you are going to do things. Otherwise, politicians will never agree on these matters. Secondly, regarding Afghanistan, border fencing has to be finished. If you go to West, you can ask the Western sources, friends, to provide you with the best of technology, perhaps motion detectors also, fence the border, and then take care of whatever you have got. The other side will take care of itself.
Right. We're now going to be taking a look at our next segment and of course the situation in Gaza, and particularly of course the issue when we talk about among of course this continuation of this genocide and the fact that there is no consequence for Israeli forces. There also emerges the fact that there is an attack, perhaps a recognized attack on the media workers and journalists in Gaza who have been heroic in bringing forward the information from on ground. And while of course many have lost their lives, there seems to be evidence in terms of the investigation by The Guardian that points towards an understanding that perhaps the media workers that have been targeted are linked with Hamas in one way or the other. And Faisal, I want your perspective on this, because this is not the first such claim that we have heard coming in from Israel and the Israeli forces in terms of whatever that they have targeted, even when they have targeted refugee camps, even when they have targeted UN sites. They have of course claimed that this is something that that has happened as a result of targeting Hamas and the militants that have been residing there, and of course there has been no evidence as such. And so I want to understand your perspective, particularly on this matter, where we talk about the protection of journalists throughout the world and the fact that they carry such an important task. And as part of this fraternity, what exactly will be the perspective then internationally that needs to be taken on this subject, especially when it seems that they're actually justifying it?
Yes, Sana, obviously when we talk about what can be done by the world itself, I mean, world is so quiet and it won't be doing anything when, even if they are killing elderly, women, children, and United Nations is shouting out loud. Even the UN departments, different projects, they are talking about it very loud, that there are of course people at stake and it is being considered or termed as a genocide. Nobody's sort of, none of the Western countries, they are coming up with the idea of not helping Israel anymore. They are part of this madness, and they are actually facilitating this madness with their bombs, with their arms, which they are constantly sending to Israel, and Israel is creating this havoc in Gaza right now. When it comes to journalists, I mean, in this particular case, as we have been seeing that there is a mechanism to this madness by the IDF and Israelis, Zionist Israelis. What they are trying to do is they are having a modus operandi that whenever they do an activity, indiscriminate activity against Gazans, and they are mass murdering them, then if somebody says, oh, it was a hospital, if somebody says, oh, it was a UN administrated school or college, they simply say, oh, we had a rocket coming from there, and we had the credible evidences. And when it is asked where are the evidences, they don't give any evidences at all, because they know that they can, of course, carry on with this madness and nobody would say anything. When I say nobody, I mean the most powerful countries of the Western world. They won't say anything because they are the ones who are actually facilitating the Zionist Israeli regime right now. And when it comes to these cases of journalists, I mean, what is happening is, as we know, that the major news providers or news agencies or news channels, their correspondents, they are not allowed by Israel itself to enter in Gaza. So what they have done is that they have outsourced the journalists who are already inside, and of course they are freelancers and they are active journalists. They have presence on social media as well and the digital media as well, and they are actually outsourcing them, and they are the very people who are getting killed in there, because Israel just does not want the truth to come out of Gaza. It does not want the world to know that it is a genocide. And when we go through the stories which are being brought forward by all of these journalists who are still working inside Gaza, them stories, they are an evidence itself, because whatever they're seeing around them, that's what they are actually reporting to their their own institutions which they are outsourced by. And to me, I think it is a new sort of a lame excuse to kill the journalist when they say, oh, they were actually associated with the Al-Aqsa media network, which of course is associated with Hamas itself and is declared as a sort of part of a terrorist group. Of course, Hamas is terrorist group. So they keep on saying that this journalist and that journalist, whoever gets killed, they come up with the idea that, oh yeah, we have the evidence that they were actually part of Al-Aqsa media network, which is not the case, at all. I mean,
right.
What they're trying to do is, their mechanism to madness is whatever is being highlighted in terms of their atrocities, they will have a lame excuse and they will present it to the world, and that would be accepted. What media groups can do, what the big media groups can do, they can of course prove to their viewers that they are not getting paid by any Zionist deep pocket. They can prove to the world with their own support for all of these journalists. A journalist is a journalist. He has a relationship with a story, and that story is whatever he's seeing and experiencing around him, and that's what they are reporting. And all of the journalists who are sitting in the West, they have to join hands to speak up for their fellow journalists who are still in the war zone, and they are shouting out loud that these are the atrocities which are being committed by Israel in Gaza.
Absolutely. And Farooq, I want quickly your perspective also on an aspect that you mentioned in a previous segment. You talked about how the epistemology of nomenclature was a non-issue and perhaps not the essence of the matter that is being discussed. And I want to know whether we're still sort of wavering away from the essence of the matter when we talk about this definition of who is associated with what, or whether reporting constitutes as being part or supportive of any military wing or not, and whether all of this matters in light of the grave genocide genocide that is being conducted and how so many thousands of human lives, including journalists, are being targeted and lost with just a country's own opinion of what life matters and what doesn't.
Right. Sana, thank you very much for the question, and I think the same principle applies here. It doesn't matter what you call it. The fact is that whatever is happening is before your eyes, and I think I am in a position to confirm to you that all of the journalists who were killed were essentially part of Hamas. Do you know why? I tell you how. Because all Hamas people are who? They are Palestinian.
Yeah.
These journalists are also Palestinian. So why not actually call everyone Hamas and kill them all, right? This is what has been happening. And this is the brutality. And let me share a secret with you. While people may shed tears of empathy on television, nobody likes an underdog.
Yeah.
And that's why they pile on and they keep on piling on. So
Right.
it will continue. You will see, 6-month-old child was also somehow part of the Hamas network, and that's why he had to be put down. Remember at the start the kind of biblical iconography that Netanyahu used, and there it was an appeal that go and kill not only their children but their animals also, and destroy their crops. So this is what has been happening. And I have, it reminded me of a verse by Faz. So I'm just going to recite it. It won't
Sure.
take that long. मिट जाएगी मखलूक तो इंसाफ करोगे, मुनसिफ हो तो अब हशर उठा क्यों नहीं रखते? What are you waiting for? If you call yourself, a juror, that all the humanity will be wiped out, and then you will actually move into action. If you are just, so why don't you bring doomsday today?
Absolutely.
And I think that this is what is happening.
Absolutely apt, yes.
It was just as lip service. It will continue.
Thank you, Farooq, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us. And we hope that the suffering of the Palestinian ends and that the world wakes up to this genocide and takes action that is required and brings to task those that are responsible. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow.